Hi guys, I'm going to talk about history again today with a presentation about the history of what was once called New France in North America, and especially the history of Quebec in Canada and Louisiana. I picked the topic because I was looking for a North American one after I saw the other day that nearly two-thirds of the views on my channel came from the US and to a lesser extent Canada, if possible with a French touch. And this gives us the history and the remains of the French presence in North America. If you ever wondered why so many Canadians speak French, why various cities and places in the Middle West, from Wisconsin to Louisiana, have French names, cities like St. Louis or Des Moines, or Detroit, or New Orleans. If you also ever wondered where the Cajuns, the Acadians, came from, this little presentation should answer your questions and I hope help you to relax. So please sit down or lay comfortably, because this is going to be another long story. The story begins in the 16th century, and especially the years 1520. To explain a bit about the context, in these first decades of the 16th century, America has been discovered by the Spanish expeditions, especially Christopher Columbus officially discovered it, or in reality rediscovered it, in 1492. And I say rediscovered because we know that centuries before, the Vikings came from Scandinavia to places that are in Canada today, and it is also likely that fishermen and sailors had seen the coasts of Canada and Brazil before Christopher Columbus officially arrived in the Caribbean. Anyway, in the first decades of the 16th century, the interest in exploration of the seas and the discovery of new trade routes rises in Western Europe. The Portuguese have discovered an eastern route towards India and China by sailing to the south of Africa and entering the Indian Ocean, and Spain is trying to do it by sailing west. It is acknowledged by the navigators that the earth is round, and they hope they can arrive in China by going the other way around and crossing the Atlantic. What they didn't know was that America was in between, and that they did not arrive in Asia as Christopher Columbus initially thought. They arrived in a new continent that was not named yet, but would be increasingly explored and colonized in the following centuries. By the way, this is the reason why indigenous people were called Indians, because at the very beginning the Spaniards believed they might have arrived in India. The other reason that makes the interest in these new territories rise is that the Spanish explorations have made them enter in contact with the pre-Columbian populations in Mexico in the years 1530s, 1540s. Mexico is conquered by Spain, and in particular the empire of the Aztecs, where very impressive quantities of gold and other treasures are discovered, making Spain and other European countries become aware of the incredible wealth that these expeditions can generate. And in the case of France, this increase in interest for the discovery of overseas territories leads to the creation of an expedition in the years 1520, about 3 decades after Christopher Columbus arrived in America, that would be financed by the King, Francis I, to try and explore the coasts of North America and find a way, a route towards China. This first expedition discovered or explored the coasts of what is Carolina today, and even the site where New York would be built at a later stage. But there was no direct installation of colonists in these years. Things would start to become more serious in the 1530s with the expedition of a navigator called Jacques Cartier, who was the first to establish a French colony in North America, in what corresponds today to the Gaspé Peninsula, south of the estuary of the St. Lawrence River in Canada. In this colony was claimed much more than developed in reality in 1534. This is at the same time that the first English settlements are created in North America, in Newfoundland, for example, and in the following decades, the French would continue to try and develop colonies in the region with very limited success in reality. There would be several attempts. one in Florida, on a site that corresponds to Jacksonville today, that was developed as a colony for French Protestants to emigrate from France and benefit from a freedom of religion, but this didn't work and the settlement was abandoned. There were other attempts on the eastern coasts of what is Canada today, once again with limited success. And the main appeal of these expeditions remained the hope to discover a naval route towards China. And the idea that several French navigators had was that through the exploration of the St. Lawrence River, it would be possible to discover this route. That looks a bit goofy to us today, now that we know the map of the world, but this seemed to make sense in this time, and several expeditions were sent that, of course, did not find any way to China, but permitted to explore and to establish maps of the St. Lawrence River. The other aspect of the French presence in the 16th century was the development of a fur trade with the Indian people, the various tribes that lived in the east of Canada. In fact, in these years, beavers were disappearing in Europe because the species had been over hunted and exploited, and they discovered very abundant populations of beavers that made the trade with this region attractive. Things would start to become more serious in the 17th century with the foundation of true settlements in North America. In 1608, the city of Quebec was founded, and a few years later, what would become the city of Montreal, and other settlements were developed in the Gaspé Peninsula, what corresponds today to the eastern states of Canada, like Nova Scotia or New Brunswick, and would become known as the colony of Acadia. So that France had two colonies in North America, Acadia, and the colony that was called Canada, that corresponded to essentially the shores of the St. Lawrence River. The problem was to attract population to these colonies, and at the same time the English were founding colonies on the eastern coast of what would become the United States, and proved much more successful in developing these colonies for various reasons. First, because the climate was obviously much more favorable in Virginia or the surrounding colonies than in Canada. The land was more fertile too, but also because there was no significant emigration flows coming outside France, contrary to England, where there were very significant religious tensions between the official Church of England, the Anglican Church, and religious minorities, the Catholics, the Puritans, who were a subdivision in Protestantism. France also had religious tensions, but that did not lead to a massive emigration. And the emigration of French Protestants mainly went to other European countries, such as the Netherlands in particular, that were called the United Provinces in the 17th century, and did not contribute to the population of overseas territories. And a third reason is that France was much more a land power than a maritime power, contrary to England. France was at constant wars with its neighbors. It was rising again to political and military proeminence in the 17th century under the reign of the kings Louis XIII and then Louis XIV, the Sun King, and the attention was much more focused on Europe and the land army than on populating colonies that were far away and costed more than they brought in terms of revenues. For all of these reasons, the French settlements in Acadia and in Canada remained very small. In 1630, for example, the population of the city of Quebec, 20 years after its foundation, was just over 100 persons. It was 300 10 years later. And at the same time, the British colonies were growing much faster, which would maintain during the whole existence of New France an incredible demographic unbalance between the two groups of colonies. But despite this, New France continued to expand, and explorators followed the St. Lawrence River, arrived to the region of the Great Lakes, that is at the frontier today between the US and Canada. They went north too and explored the Hudson Bay, and south of the Great Lakes to the Mississippi Basin that was entirely claimed in the end of the 17th century by the Kingdom of France, and was named in homage to the King Louis XIV, Louisiana. The colony of Louisiana, in fact, was much larger than the state of Louisiana today. It included everything from Wisconsin and Montana to Louisiana, like a large triangle that also included all of the Mississippi River. But the presence in this very large territory was extremely limited. There were a few forts every 600-700 miles. There were very small villages too, but no colonization as we call it today, and New France remained very unpopulated in comparison with English colonies in the eastern part of the continent. There were efforts made, especially under the reign of Louis XIV, the Sun King, to try and populate this enormous colony, but it only amounted to a few thousand colonists, and an effort to try and bring more women to the colonies, where the genders were incredibly unbalanced. In the colony of Canada, for example, by the middle of the 17th century, there was 16 men for one woman, and this unbalance would limit the demographical growth of the colonies. However, the colony of Canada and the southern coast of Louisiana on the Gulf of Mexico finally managed to take off in terms of population, so that by the middle of the 18th century, the total population of New France amounted to 60,000 persons, which remains very limited, especially given that at the same time the English colonies had almost 2 million inhabitants, more than 30 times more than New France. This underpopulation of New France meant that the colonists had to find alliances with Indian tribes in order to avoid being overwhelmed in case of war. And in Canada there were two important group of tribes, the Iroquois and the Hurons. Historically, France allied with the latter and fought with them against the Iroquois, and would also use, like Britain, these Indian tribes in order to fight against its main European opponent. There were various wars between France and Britain in the second half of the 17th and in the 18th century, when the war extended outside Europe in their respective colonial empires, and New France was the weakest link in French possessions worldwide, because of its inability to defend such a large territory with so few men. Another thing that limited the expansion of New France was that the French colonies in the Caribbean were much more profitable and attractive to French colonists. New cultivations such as coffee. If you watched the video I made about the history of coffee, you remember that I talked about the introduction of coffee and sugar and even cotton in these French islands of the West Indies and Saint Domingo. But these islands were producing colonial products of much higher value than what could be found in New France, and they were given the priority in the 17th and 18th centuries. The first loss of territory in New France would follow the last war of Louis XIV's reign, the War of Succession of Spain, which ended with the Treaty of Brunswick, and under the terms of this treaty, France ceded the Bay of Hudson to England, allowing England to now start to circle French possessions. But the loss of most of New France would take place after the 7 Years' War by the middle of the 18th century. The 7 Years' War is maybe the first world war in history, because even though it was initially and primarily an European conflict between Britain and Prussia against an alliance of France and Spain and Austria, the war spread to the rest of the world through the opposition of France and Britain, and the Northern American part of this conflict is known as the French and Indian Wars, during which New France and the population of Quebec resisted surprisingly well to the British invasion, but after several years and a naval blockade of the city of Quebec, which was the political head of the colony of Canada, the entire New France fell under control of Britain. And when peace was signed, France was given the choice to abandon either New France, so this enormous Northern American territory, or its colonies in the Caribbean, especially the islands of Martinique, Guadeloupe, and Saint Domingo. As these colonies were easier to defend and economically more important, France retained them and signed a treaty that shared New France between England, that took possession of Canada, and parts of the New France that was in the north, the region of the Great Lakes in particular, whereas the rest of the colony of Louisiana went to the administration of Spain. And this region of the Middle West and what is the state of Louisiana today became Spanish for a bit more than 40 years, during which various moves of population happened. One first move was what happened to the Cajuns. The Cajuns, who you remember, were living in this region of Acadia, east of what is Canada today, and this region also included a small part of the state of Maine, the northern part of it. This colony was now under the rule of Britain, and in order to better control the region, Britain had a policy of expelling or sometimes even deporting the population in the Acadia. Many of them went either to what was before the colony of Canada, Quebec, and the others went to Louisiana, especially the coast of Mexico, of the Gulf of Mexico, and contributed to populating this state of Louisiana, which explains the presence of the Cajuns in New Orleans and the southern part of Louisiana today. Another inflow of population in Louisiana came from the French colonies in the West Indies in the following decades. After the French Revolution, there was a large slave revolt in the island of Saint Domingo, where slaves actually took control of the island and created a new state which still exists today, the state of Haiti. And this forced a large part of the population of European origin to emigrate, to escape this country where their ancient slaves were now in control. And most of them also went to Louisiana, sometimes wealthy people who developed plantations in Louisiana and contributed to the creation of the upper society in the south of Louisiana in the 19th century, and in New Orleans in particular. But they emigrated at a time when Louisiana was no more under French rule. Louisiana received other flows of population, a few Spanish colonists, more slaves. The economy of Louisiana was based on plantations, so some of them were brought from the West Indies, but the majority were deported from Africa in the 19th century. And still today, Louisiana has a very important African American population, which is the legacy of this slavery in the state until it was abolished. This culture of Louisiana is the product of various influences, obviously for a part of French origin, but as you see, more than a French state, Louisiana is a melting pot of French, Spanish, Caribbean, African cultures that have created a very specific identity of this state, something that can be observed in New Orleans, obviously, but maybe even more in this south of Louisiana, because New Orleans was in fact transformed by the Spaniards, and the so-called French district in the center of New Orleans was in fact built under the administration of Spain in Spanish style, so it is not that French in reality. In other parts of New France, and especially Quebec, that was the main center of population, the local identity was fiercely defended by the descendants of French colonists who retained their Catholic identity and their language that distinguished them from the British rulers. And to this day, the strong focus of the Québécois on maintaining their distinctive culture explains that French is still spoken in majority, even though most Québécois speak English very well too, but remains largely spoken in this part of Canada. Actually, Montreal is the second largest French-speaking city in the world, just after Paris, and about 60% of the inhabitants in Montreal speak French at home, and the cultural exchanges between Quebec and France remained very strong, very active. Many French citizens, when they want to emigrate to North America, go to this part of Canada, and Montreal in particular, and it is a common thing for the Québécois to spend time to study, or for artists to try and be recognized in France before sometimes trying an international career. The archetypal Québécois singer that emerged in France before becoming famous in other parts of the world was Céline Dion, for example. So another episode nevertheless would take place before North America is entirely abandoned by France, and it would be what is called the Louisiana sale by Napoleon to the United States. You could find it surprising because I told you that by the middle of the 18th century, France had lost control of all of New France, and in the case of Louisiana, had lost it to Spain. But what happened is that 40 years later, as the French Revolution had started, and Napoleon had taken power in France, Spain became an ally, or more precisely a satellite of France in this period, and Napoleon forced a treaty a secret treaty with Spain just in the first year of the 19th century to exchange the colony of Louisiana against the region of Tuscany in Italy. That was returned or given to Spain in exchange for several things, including the colony of Louisiana. And once again, this colony of Louisiana was representing about 1/4 of the US territory today. It was not just the state of Louisiana, it included the Mississippi Basin and the region of the Great Lakes, and it went as far as Montana in the west. But at the beginning of the 19th century, during the Napoleonic Wars, the French presence in North America and even in America in general was weakened again by the Napoleonic Wars. France had to focus on the European theater. The revolt and the independence of Haiti had made it lose its most valuable colony in America, and it looked impossible for France to defend this territory of Louisiana. So that as the US were interested in expanding west, an agreement was found to sell Louisiana, and this is the Louisiana Purchase of 1803 that permitted the US to legally own this region of the Mississippi Basin and to open to the colonization the west part of the territory of the US today. What remains of this French presence today is essentially this cultural print in parts of Canada, Quebec, but there are French-speaking minorities in all of Canada. This cultural print in Louisiana that gives to Louisiana a very particular identity for the Americans today. You probably noticed that Louisiana is seen like a place with a very ancient presence and legends, a colonial European flavor that explains that many novels with vampires, for example, have Louisiana as a background. The novels of Anne Rice, Interview with a Vampire, is set in New Orleans, but you also have plenty of TV shows, be there for adults like True Blood, or for teens like all of these vampire stories. I think the last season of American Horror Story takes place in Louisiana too. So there is a very specific image of Louisiana with this mix of voodoo and French and Spanish presence. There is one last territory that belongs to France in the region that was never lost and kept as a base for fishermen, the islands of Saint Peter and Miquelon, Saint-Pierre et Miquelon, on the coast of Canada, but we are talking about something really tiny, a few thousand inhabitants, and many names of cities and places in the Middle West. I told you at the beginning the city names like St. Louis or Des Moines, Detroit, or the Cadillac brand of cars are also remains. In the case of Cadillac, the brand was obviously created long after the French were gone. It is a tribute to the explorer and adventurer who founded the city of Detroit. This is going to be all for today. I hope you enjoyed this moment, and I hope to see you soon. Bye bye.